Welcome everybody to this World Satsanga held on the 22nd of June 2022 in conjunction with Kevin Moore and The Moore Show. And as usual, I encourage you to visit his YouTube channel, The Kevin Moore Show, because he will have added an additional one or two hours of his series they call us Channelers, which is a docu-series which is now about 60 plus, perhaps even nearly 70 now. Different interviews he's had with people who are channelers or connected to source or connected to the greater reality in some way, shape or other. And they all have different methods and they all have different qualities of being able to connect. So it's worthwhile having a look to expand your mind in this particular area. So the lecture today is the incarnation process from a mechanical perspective. In July's Satsanga, I'm going to do the disassociation from the physical form, or the demise process. So this is going to be a two-part series. Now, for those of you who remember, when we incarnate into the physical form, we are basically inserting an element or a volume of sentience and energy into a low frequency body, a vehicle, what we call human body. So, but for those of you who don't, I'll quickly describe what we are. We are, in essence, individualized units of sentience and energy from source, a larger volume of sentience and energy, which was created by another larger volume of sentience and energy called the origin. But our source, the source of our sentience and energy, is basically what we call God, if you want to use a religious text. The source has created countless billions or trillions of smaller individualized units of itself, what I'm told to call our true energetic self, or the soul in Dolores canon speak, or higher self, or in the Hindu text is called the Godhead. So that those smaller individualized units can experience, learn and evolve the minute detail of the structure. That's what it is. And it did this by isolating half of its own structure and using that as a shall we say, an environment for those smaller parts to enter into and experience the absolute minute detail, not just from an environmental perspective, but also from an interactive perspective. So we experience, learn, and evolve by interacting with the environment, interacting with other volumes of sentience and energy, what I call an aspect, which is a smaller individualized unit of sentience energy from the true energetic self, we sometimes call the soul. And it also interacts with the circumstances surrounding those interactions with those other smaller aspects of sentience energy, those other souls. And the consequential interaction creates what we call an evolutionary progression. So we interact with the environment, we interact with circumstances surrounding the environment, and the circumstances surrounding the communication with other souls within that environment as well, within the circumstances surrounding all those. So quite complex, as you can imagine. And you being part of it now, you can understand how complex it is. Normally, we exist in the multiversal environment, which is this environment that the source has created for us to experience on its behalf. And one of those environments is the physical universe, which exists in the lowest of the full dimensions, the first full dimension, which in turn houses all of the lowest frequencies. And because it houses all the lowest frequencies, those frequencies that are there are all required to create the physical universe. So the physical universe is rather unique. It's the only universe in the whole of the multiverse that needs more than one frequency to create the opportunity for it to exist. All of the other frequencies, from the lowest frequency in the lowest subdimensional component of the next full dimension, which is the second, all have the capability of housing a universal environment in their own right. Think of it like storage media. In the old days, we used to have up to probably 12 different floppy disks to load a program onto a computer. Now we can load that program thousands of times, hundreds of thousands of times on some of the memory sticks which are, you know, up to a terabyte. So you can see that it's nothing to do with size; it's to do with the finitude or the fineness of it. Now, normally we exist in this multiversal environment, which is a higher frequency, and we have the ability to instantly know who and what we are, communicate with other entities of similar or same evolutionary level, and that communication is instantaneous as well, and the knowledge is instantly broadcast or communicated between us, and everything is understood that will be understood, that could be understood, that has been understood, that should be understood, because everything exists concurrently. So we're able to communicate and integrate and interact in a concurrent basis. But when we experience being in a lower frequency, that level of functionality reduces significantly. And being in the physical universe, this level of communicative ability or level of bandwidth associated with the ability to communicate in this level is so drastically reduced, it's almost non-existent. Although we are still able to have some level of communicative ability, irrespective of that massive drop in bandwidth. The only issue is that most individuals are so engrossed with being here that they can't work past that the need to increase their frequencies to allow them to enter into a level of ability to communicate with who and what they are, other entities that are incarnate at higher frequencies, because if they incarnate into the higher frequency, then they retain some level of communicative ability because their bandwidth is higher. And of course, those other entities are disincarnate, which are obviously much higher frequency. So the whole of the frequencies associated with the physical universe are areas that we can incarnate into of various different levels of finitude and various levels of communicative bandwidth. The gross physical, which is the first three of the frequencies, scientific mankind calls it the third dimension, which is, in my understanding, an incorrect level of understanding, because the third dimension is really just a, shall we say, a metric for volume, height, width, and depth, whereas the three frequencies create the condition for the gross physical to exist. And the other frequencies above that are other aspects of the capacity for the physical universe to house other levels of content. So if we went on to the fifth frequency associated with the physical universe, we would see much more content on the Earth. For example, we'd see that which is in the fifth frequency, we'd see that which is in the fourth frequency, and we'd see that which is in the cumulative effect of the first three frequencies, called the physical, or the gross physical aspect of the physical universe. So when our true energetic self decides to experience something on this particular level, this level of difficulty, because it's you can consider how difficult it is to walk in water, but you can walk very easily in air, or even easier if you're in orbit, for example, if you move around very quickly. You can see how difficult it is for us to be here normally, because it's worse than going from air to water. It's like us entering into concrete. But the problem is, coming here does create the possibility to have a significantly accelerated level of evolutionary progression. So that's why we come here, because we're basically like a blind rat in a maze when we are here. The ability for us to learn or interact with the environment is difficult, because we have no preconception of what we're doing here. We have no, although we do have a life plan associated with it, which is a series of goals we need to achieve, and the free will side is how we achieve those goals. But we don't have the ability to see things from the helicopter view, for example, which is what we would have if we were higher frequency. So we have to work our way through this maze of incarnation, pretty much cut off from everything. But there is still a small level of communicative ability between us as the volume of sentience and energy, this smaller volume of sentience and energy from the true energetic self, which I call the aspect, which we sometimes call the soul, and of course most religions call it the soul. But in essence, that's what gets projected from the higher self or the true energetic self into the lower frequencies. So the true energetic self can experience, learn, and evolve as a function of a smaller part of it going into the environment. So we have the source creating a smaller part of it to experience the multiverse, which is the true energetic self, Godhead, over self, higher self, which in turn creates a smaller version, again, a smaller aspect of sentience and energy to experience even more micro level of the multiverse, which we call the physical universe. But to do that, we need to move into a vehicle, the human body. In this instance, there's lots of other bodies in different locations, different galaxies within the physical universe at different frequencies. And we've all experienced a larger majority of the different types of body type that we can use to experience, learn, and evolve in the different environments, supported by different planets in different galaxies in different frequencies. But to enable us to connect with the body, we need to move into the frequencies associated with it. So the body itself, the physical form itself, is useless without a soul, without an aspect to animate it. So although it's there with all the bones and the sinews and the veins and the muscles and the skin and the brain and the major organs, without a soul occupying it, without an aspect of the true energetic self occupying it, doesn't work. So when a particular experience in a particular location with a particular family type or a series of individuals is decided upon, the aspect then has the ability to work with a series of guides or a guide and helpers. I call them a series of guides, but basically there's one guide in general and a group of other helpers who are other entities that I've decided to be in the aspect of service to those other entities who are entering into the evolutionary cycle. So they don't enter into the evolutionary cycle, although they do evolve as a function of working with us. We actively are in the evolutionary cycle because we're experiencing, learning, and evolving through interaction with the multiverse in a rather intimate way. So in terms of the incarnation process, the mechanics of it, what happens? Well, the Trinity itself decides which part of us that may have experienced incarnation before and therefore have a level of experience that will help it or be of skill sets, etc., that it wants to project into a certain location within the physical universe. Let's call it the Earth in this instance. And so it creates shall we say, a connective medium that's going to resist the loss of connection as a function of going down the frequencies. This is something called a Hara line. Plenty of people talk about the Hara line, but basically it's a multi-frequential hypodermic sized tube that the aspect or soul moves down and through and enters into the lowest frequencies, goes down the first of the three highest frequencies, the 10th frequency, 9th and 8th frequency, which are the step down functions associated with the aspect or soul's ability to integrate or incarnate into a vehicle. So that's like a tunnel effect. It sort of squeezes it down into the physical, or should say the very, very high frequency physical. And then it enters into the 7 frequencies that are associated with the constructs that we call the body, which are also associated with the chakras. Each of the chakras is for want of a better word, a energy receiver, which is there to provide energy for the energy templates that creates the possibility of the human form to exist. So in this instance, we have the 7th chakra deals with the 7th frequency, which deals with the 7th template. The 6th chakras deal with the 6 frequencies, which deal with the 6th template. The 5th chakras deal with the 5th frequencies, which deal with the the fifth energy templates, etc., etc. So we have all these energy templates that are fed energy by these energy receivers called the chakras, which are like an energy system, which are there to allow these parts of us to exist and to function. So in effect, the human form and other body types that exist within the gross physical aspect of the physical universe have 10 levels of frequency associated with them. 3 which are basically a step-down function, and 7 which are a gradual reduction in frequency, but nevertheless have a template associated with them that creates the possibility of the form to exist in the gross physical, and it creates a vehicle, a body type. So when the soul comes down this Hara line, this hypodermically small tube, it moves down through these frequencies and enters a location called the center of the body, the core star. The core star is in a location not too far away from the Tantien, or in fact the plexus that allows the third chakra, the solar chakra, to be connected to the energy, shall we say, connections between all the chakras, and therefore the energy templates that create the body. So all the sentience energy goes down towards the core star, which is sort of above the belly button by about 3 inches or 7.5 centimeters, and about 3 inches in, but not quite in the same location as the Tantien, which is exactly that position. The core star exists in a multi-frequential way, which means it exists in all frequencies concurrently. This then ends up being a junction where the sentience and the energy associated with the sentience start to detach from each other whilst still being connected. So the energy then moves into an area called the Tantien, and the Tantien then creates the possibility of the sentience animating the body as a function of the junction that we call the core star. So the Tantien is the physical interface, if you call it, for the energies associated with the aspect or soul to animate the body. The sentience itself moves further up the body to a location just behind the plexus, or around the area of the plexus of the heart chakra. That's called the soul seat. So the essence of what we are, again, is pan-frequential, exists in the soul seat. So our sentience, what we are, exists in the soul seat, not the brain, not the liver or the kidneys. It's in the soul seat. The brain is another function, another junction or juncture or terminus, if you want to call it that, that allows the, shall we say, the desire to animate the body to function through the core star to the Tantien and then animate the body. So we've got this rather complex situation where we see the gross physical having lots of different components to it: veins, bones, muscles, sinews, nervous systems, endocrine systems. But then we have an energy system which allows that body to be created in the first place, which is energized by the energies and the frequencies associated with the chakras, which energize energy templates, which allows the body to be manifest. And then we have that, all of that being controlled by the sentience, using its connection to the Tantien, which allows the animation of the body. So that's the incarnation process, and we stay here in this body, and as a function of that, we create a temporary personality we call the ego, which is only a temporary personality because it's associated with our incarnation, because this function of us being almost totally cut off means that we start to forget who we are, but we also start to associate it with the environment that we find ourselves in, which is the human body. That's the closest to the environment. So the personality is created as a function of us losing the ability to remember who and what we are because of the intenseness or the intensity of the incarnation, and the low frequencies as well, which we need to work with. And hopefully we can work very hard with those frequencies and become higher frequency, and then start to open that bandwidth again. So the incarnation process the mechanical side and the reasons for it, I've just gone through, and the detachment or the demise side I'll go through in July. But in essence, and just to summarize, we are sentience and energy. We are temporarily assigned to a vehicle or body type to experience, learn, and evolve as a function of being involved in an environment with low frequency, having most of our communicative bandwidth removed from us, but also interacting with the environment that's in this low frequency, other souls that are doing the same thing as us, creating circumstances within the environment, and us interacting with the environment, the circumstances within the environment, other entities that create those circumstances, and the circumstances that we create, and how that affects the environment and ourselves. And that's how we evolve. So I hope this is simple enough for you. I'll try to make it simple, but basically, if you want to read more, then please do read the AND dialogues, because the function of the incarnation process is within a chapter in the AND dialogues. Okay, so now it's time for the questions and answers session. Well, welcome everybody to the questions and answers part of the June Satsanga. And I see we've got quite a number of people here already. Thank you. And Nina's got the first question in very, very quickly. So I'll read these out. I hope that hope that people can understand my particular flavour of English. When you're talking about how we are currently dropping down the frequencies due to everything that's happening in the world, what exactly do you mean? We occupy 3 frequencies here on Earth. Does this mean that we are just dropping down below the third to the second and the first, or are there many more in between, or is it something completely different? Well, basically, we were heading towards the 4th full frequency, which is the lower astral, if you want to use a piece of New Age speak towards it. And that would have allowed us to be able to see other entities, like astral entities and other incarnate entities that are higher frequency than ourselves, so we'd see who else is here. And maybe we might even see those entities who have finished their incarnation but are still linked to the Earth in some way, i.e. they don't want to give up being here. So in essence, we're dropping down from somewhere near 3.85-ish down towards the third. We'll never go below the first 3 frequencies, because that's what creates the gross physical. But we are lower than we were back in 2012, for example. And you can see from all the nonsense that's happening in the world that this is what happens with when we get down lower frequencies. And recently we've had another outbreak of polio, for example. And that's another example of what happens to us when we become lower frequency, because in essence, we start to become susceptible to disease, physical and mental dysfunction, because we're not exposing ourselves to the functions available to us at higher frequencies. So it's between dropping down towards the third. It won't go lower than the third. Okay, next question. Many spiritual teachers and people I follow speak of big shifts happening on Earth right now and how we are moving upwards. That new energy came in and we are having a lot of help from different beings. What's your take on this, or sources' take on this? How is this the manifestation way of lifting? How is the manifestation way of lifting us up? Well, in my experience, we're still just bottoming out, really. So they're anticipating the potential for us to move up again, but we're going to bounce along the bottom a little bit first before we start to move up again. And we're only going to start to move up when we start to work with each other properly. We start to eradicate the potential for other wars, for instance, and the war in Ukraine will be finalized and sorted out, and the communication back with Russia will be sorted out. So when we start to work in a more mature way and start to realize that we need to have leaders that are more mature rather than always trying to bend the rules. And there's another thing that's happening in the UK right now, where we're trying to change the human rights legislation, which is across all of Europe, which should be really a worldwide legislation, just to try and make the UK more independent in how we deal with people, which is complete nonsense. We should have a worldwide level of human rights, not just, oh, this is our particular flavor of it. So you can see that we're still bouncing on the bottom, because these sorts of thought processes and the ways in which governments act are a function of the low frequencies. So that's a very good question. So we're not actually moving yet, but when we start to get enough people like us, like all of the people on the Satsanga and those who listen to it later, and other people such as some of Kevin Moore's stuff, we'll start to see our movement back up the frequencies again, because we'll start to feed off each other and get this triangulation effect, and we'll start to think in a more mature and more spiritual way. So good set of questions. Okay. Next one's from Andrew. If there is no time when everything is happening concurrently, doesn't that mean that the origin has already expanded beyond what it currently is, has seen back beyond its own backyard, and has even evolved to its total potential capacity? If so, I get the hunch that that the origin never really stops evolving. Yes, although I'm just starting. I'm 2,000 words into a book called Beyond the Origin, which is basically more about the origin and more about understanding what's happening to it in the other event spaces that we could classify as the far and distant future. And what I'm picking up is that although, and this is part of the forward, by the way, although the origin recognizes and understands that everything happens concurrently, it's already happened, or is happening, or will happen all together in one. But there is something to be cherished by being in the moment. There is something to be cherished by being in the now and not knowing everything about everything concurrently. So it's almost like it enjoys being experiencing things, some things in a linear perspective. And from our perspective, we are adding towards that, because although we are individualized units of sentience from our source entity, who is obviously a individualized unit of sentience from the origin, and our true energetic selves are subsequently individualized units of sentience. Because we as individualized units of that sentience are in the tongue twister, I know, in the lower frequencies, we experience things in a linear way, because that's because of the bandwidth associated with being in the low frequency. We can't experience things concurrently. So experiencing things the way we do sort of interests the origin, because it's like us trying to understand how to get to the center of a maze when we're deaf, dumb, and blind. I mean, just being able to look at it from a helicopter perspective and move into the maze is okay, but we're not experiencing anything. We're not experiencing going the wrong direction. We're not experiencing, walking into a hedge, for example, and not knowing which way we're going. So there's something to be cherished about experiencing things in a linear perspective, or from the point of view of the origin, a near linear perspective. So that's why. So it'll never stop evolving, and I've got the feeling that at the end of the book that we're going to understand that there is no such thing as a limit to its own structure. I really get the feeling that it's just there's more and more and more, and the depth of sentience and the quality of sentience associated with a certain section or volume of its structure also improves as well. So there's like a depth of evolution as well it's got to experience. So it's so it's a good question. It appreciates experiencing the moment. That's the best way to answer that question. So from Ulla, next question. Humanity is going through one crisis after another, with pandemics, now energy crisis, food crisis, famine in Africa, and Putin's war. Are these events designed by the powers to keep us focused on the physical survival rather than spiritual development, or to convert democracies into authoritarian states that are easier to control? We are being given the opportunity to observe what happens when we take our eye off the ball, when we stop being concerned about our development, when we think that we've got there and we get complacent and we do nothing about maintaining that level that we're at. Even Paramahansa Yogananda said that we never get to the point where we can relax. from a spiritual or an evolutionary perspective. And so when we think that we've got there, we actually haven't. We start to relax. And therefore, although we reach a level, we start to drop down because we start to get comfortable with that level. And then we don't start to observe ourselves dropping down, because it's easier to drop down the frequencies because it becomes comfortable, and we start to get the ego coming into it saying, I've got control of you again. And we start to become complacent with our confidence and our comfortableness, that we start to allow things to slip. So it's not that any power is doing it, it's us doing it to ourselves, and we're giving ourselves, in as a result of it, probably subconsciously from what I'm picking up right now, the opportunity to see what happens when we do stop driving the boat. The boat will veer off course. The aeroplane will start to drop down. Okay, the train might accelerate. The car will come off the road. We have to keep driving what we're doing. There's no end to it, and this is what we're. This from a worldwide perspective, and all levels, lack of governance is what happens when we allow things to happen on automatic when they're actually not on automatic. Okay, good question. This is from Julia. Since June the 16th, Mercury, Venus, Uranus, Mars, Jupiter, Neptune, and Saturn, all the 7 stars, appear in a straight line towards the Earth. What kind of effects will it bring to Earth and to humankind? Is it a breaking point of energy change? Actually, I don't know much about astrology, if anything at all, and I'm not quite sure that from a spiritual perspective. I'm just asking the question whether any of the alignment of planets, other than the gravitational effect, has any effect on us at all in terms of how we think, behave, and act, and how we evolve. No, I'm not getting anything that I can say with any confidence. But what the only thing I am seeing is that, relatively speaking, there will be a gravitational effect, a pull on us, and that will create a lower frequency effect. So in essence, all the planets aligned result in a slightly lower frequency because they're creating an enhanced gravitational effect. That's a very physical thing. Okay. So when they move away from each other, then that releases that effect, and we start to be able to move up the frequencies again. Okay. Okay. Another good question. Now another one from Ulla. Global organizations have failed to keep the peace, health, economy, and stability of nations. Are we supposed to restructure everything at the grassroots level instead of waiting for leaders to put people before profits, to limit corporate greed and government corruption, for example, and how? We're only going to be able to do this when we collectively realize that those individuals we have in place aren't doing what they should do for the benefit of everybody, and that's like a worldwide, or should I say a countrywide thing that we need to do, and that allows us to vote into power those that we feel could support the needs of the many rather than the needs of the few, which is basically what's happening. So people are politicians now. They want to be leaders because that's what they want to do. In the old days, people were politicians because they made a lot of money out of the population, and they wanted to help the population by reforming the facilities and the services available to the population that have helped them become rich. So they were industrialists, and they had worked with people, and they'd become successful with people. So they wanted to help those people in return. So they, in essence, they were putting back into the community what they received back, what they received from it. Whereas people haven't experienced that. So that there's an imbalance in the level of power afforded to people versus their desire to assist those who they have, who've put them in power, basically. So it's very greedy at the moment, very, very greedy. To continue this question, about 2 years ago, you told us about 60% of the timelines were going in the wrong direction for humanity. Only 30 to 40% of the event streams were going the right way. We should be, so has this changed for better? Or is it for worse then? Looking at it now, I'm seeing a number of them collapse back into a mainstream. So those that were going off at a complete tangent have become an evolutionary dead end, have dissolved and come back in towards the next mainstream branch of event space. We are still fairly low in the percentage of event streams that go in the sort of the right direction. I'm picking up 45% of it. So we've got a little bit of an improvement, although it's only ever an estimate, because these things, the event streams and event spaces come and go depending upon how people interact with them and how people decide to join them or relate to them. But we are becoming more aware of the need to work together to create a better environment, physically and spiritually, and of course mentally. And so that's why it's a little bit better than it was. That doesn't mean we've moved up the frequencies. It just means that we're starting to move in the right direction. And you can see that from the way we're reacting to working with the environment. And I was reading a newspaper article a couple of days ago, and it showed that some of the mammals that were previously on the endangered list a few years ago are now making massive recoveries because of the work of human beings, helping them to survive and allowing their numbers to proliferate. So we are moving in the right direction. Would you give us an update on the white children amongst us? Are there any more new ones born or planned? When will they become more influential in their work for humanity, all life forms and the earth? God knows we need them to jumpstart humanity right now, as soon as possible. They're still in the background, apart from Greta Thunberg. What I'm just being told is there seems to be like a natural progression of introduction of these leaders that are either qualitative or quantitative or in the background. And the thing that needs fixing first is the environment. So that's why we've got Greta there, whose soul is a walk-in. Not so the body is the same body, but the soul who started to do the work is actually another soul, not the one that was born with the body. And so I'm not seeing anything else other than the work that Greta's done. And I'm seeing that what Greta's doing now is basically consolidating her position. So that's why we haven't seen much of her. But if you look around the world, there's lots of people doing lots of work with the environment, and there's lots of individuals identifying the things that we shouldn't be doing. For instance, stripping the rainforest. For instance, starting to destroy areas in preference of one crop. Those sorts of things. Mining, things like lithium mining. I mean, lithium mining is horrendous for people who mine it, and because they get exposed to all sorts of different radiation, and it creates all sorts of deformities. So we need to understand that some things that are supposedly green aren't actually so green. Okay, next question from Julia. Is the Chinese government cooperating with alien civilizations right now? How many countries' governments are involved in communication with alien civilizations? The artificial sun in the east, full superconducting tokamak fusion experiment facility of China. Are there any alien-supported technologies involved? There's a lot of alien technology, if you want to call it that, or a technology that isn't specifically attributable to the way our technological growth curve was going, is being given to us. Most of it is being given to us through channeled work that the individuals who are scientists who are developing it don't appreciate, is them channeling it rather than them thinking that they're developing it. So they're being given ideas to work in certain ways, to do certain experiments that allow us to have certain technologies. And as I said before, you've only got to see things like display technology on computers and telephones, and the way we're going now, we're going away from silicon to plastics as being the semiconductors and the processors, to understand that we are getting help in certain ways, but in others, it's not so obvious. It's not like governments are being taught specifically by a group of entities that are incarnate but come from a different location within this galaxy or other galaxies, or in fact under the frequency. It's mostly being downloaded to us, to those, and not just to one person, by the way. It's to a number of individuals, because there's so much information that's, and it's so difficult sometimes that some people don't grasp it, and so it gets lost, whereas others can grasp it and can move it, and then some are successful with it and some aren't. In terms of energy generation, we will be moving away from, eventually, mass generation from large generating facilities such as the fusion, for example. Now I think we've currently got the other side of it, which is fission. So, or one of the other. So if I get it wrong, I've got 50% chance of getting it right or getting it wrong. But the one that is the difficult one. We've got one now which is very easy to do. I think, to create electricity by nuclear facilities, but it's the one that harnesses the top of energy that the sun's got, and I think that's what you just said here, artificial sun. Yeah, it's the same sort of technology, but we can get that smaller, much smaller, because we can also tap into the energies, the prana, if you want to call it that, or the orgone energy, which is all around the multiverse, not just the universe, and we don't need to have big machines to do that. So that's what's going to particularly happen sort of next. So that's going to be quite about 50, 60 years away, maybe 100 years away. Next question from Julia is, do the leaders of main countries now ever think about universal union and the bigger truth? Are they making efforts for the Earth to ascend, or if they do, how do they cooperate? I'm picking up there are a few individuals, a very few individuals, but in the mainstream, people don't know about it. They don't understand about the fact that we are all from the same entity, and therefore we're all one. It's still considered to be spiritual mumbo jumbo, spiritual nonsense. Although there are a few scientists, a few theoretical scientists that are starting to think in this way. So I think the direction will eventually come from the scientists, and maybe even medical science might identify a few things as well. Okay. The next one, from my own opinion, Putin is a true strong man who is so strong and plays such an important role on Earth. One man against the pressure of the whole Western world, war, politics, and economy. Old balance is being broken, and everything is changing and struggling. How will the new balance be like? How would it manifest? Can Putin be that strong to fight until the end of the new balance formed? What kind of support do his guides provide him? In effect, Putin's taking over the role of Adolf Hitler, in so much as he has created a universal, worldwide focus upon himself and his country. And so, in essence, it's a wake-up call for us all to recognize that we shouldn't be considering ourselves so powerful that we can affect the lives of others in a forceful way. What we should all be doing is working in a universally benevolent way, which is agreed upon by worldwide consensus. And so, if you like, although Putin is considered to be significantly evil, he has a role to play which is going to help us become more mature. And that level of maturity is being seen, but is taking its time to become an action right now. So we are still having to put up with the fighting and the war situation we have there and the atrocities that are occurring. But in essence, it's again it's reminding us how we should work together. We're working together with some of the environmental problems we've had with our earthquakes and floods and fires, and with people having droughts and things. We do work together that way, and we're starting to work together in a should I say non-volatile way to assist the Ukrainians. But that's the thing. We're learning how to put the fire out without creating another fire, and that's the very start of being a collectively mature thought process. Okay, a good question. Okay, so the last question from Julia. The Buddhist theory states that the 6 great divisions in the wheel of karma. I shall start again. The Buddhist theory states that there are 6 great divisions in the wheel of karma. Can it be understood as complexities of karma, practicing incarnations, or when to get out of the necessity of incarnation? Or karma is clean, or a soul can get rid of karma. My understanding is that karma is something which is specifically attributable to being in the physical universe. It is associated with our thoughts, behaviors, and actions that are affected by low frequencies. That means addictions, it means wanting to have status, material wealth, greed. We just basically think only of ourselves. We're selfish. And so anything that feeds the ego is karmic. And that includes things that we've experienced in previous incarnations that we didn't clear, that we need to clear in this incarnation or subsequent incarnations. So in essence, there may be 6 divisions that I'm not aware of, or should I say classifications or genres, which could be, of course, it could be thoughts, behaviors, actions, material wealth, addictions, and those addictions can be to status, money, belongings, okay, authority. So these things could be part of that, and it could be that another one of the great divisions is karma between individual souls, and karma between ourself and ourself in previous incarnations. So although I don't know the great divisions, I can understand that there are genres associated with karma. And actually, when I look at the presentation I did, and what I'll do is I'll send links to the presentation on what karma is. You'll maybe see some, shall I say, similarities between how I've divided karma up generically and how the Buddhists divide it up. I'm fairly sure it'll be quite similar. But basically, when we're able to navigate through our incarnation, i.e. being in the physical but not of the physical, and therefore we don't accrue karma, we don't accrue any addictions, we don't gossip, we are content with what we are, we help others with service when it's required, we will then start to be able to work in a way where we can be here but not accrue karma. When we've done that, we'll have mastered incarnation and we'll have ascended beyond the need to incarnate. And that's where the term ascended master comes in. Okay, right, this is okay. Next question is Daniel to everybody. Who are the top 3 leaders and countries on the planet? Right now, the top 3 leaders are those who have the greatest effect. Just because one is a leader is part of a large country doesn't mean they're a top leader. It depends on how they are affecting the rest of the world. Okay, and so it might not be a leader that's actually one of the top leaders. It might be somebody who's on a committee, for example. Okay. Next one's from Bill. What is the nature of the expanse of the physical universe? The Hubble telescope can see distant galaxies, but is space eventually finite or infinite? Or is it simply a thought in the mind of the source that can be whatever source wants it to be, regardless? We are unable to comprehend either. That's a very good question, actually. And my answer to that is, what we see with the Hubble telescope and what we see with our physical eyes are, in effect, just the gross physical frequencies. We've still got another 9 frequencies that are part of the content of the physical universe. So the physical universe is finite. We've got about 10 minutes left. But it's finite in terms of the content associated with each particular frequency. And so we've got a similar level of content in the fourth frequency, but a bit more because it's finer. And then we got a bit more content in the fifth compared to the fourth, which is compared to the third. So we start to see that if we went on the 12th frequency, we could observe everything on the 12th frequency, that the universe is packed. There's no black spots in between, like we can see now. There's everything is intermerging with everything else. It's absolutely full of entities, full of environments we can experience, learn, and evolve with as well. So it's got a finite condition associated with what the frequencies that create the physical universe can support in terms of universal content. Very good question. Okay, another sort of general comment here. What is the most practical thing or things we can do to help and bring ourselves into a higher level of frequency? Be of service. Meditate. Be of service when appropriate. Don't force your service on other people, because that can backfire and create friction and create other levels of resistance as well. So it's best to be of service when it's required, but also don't get yourself in a position where your service is taken for granted. Don't expect any reward, anything, any form of reward, whether it's verbal reward or whether it's physical reward or reward in kind. But moreover, try not to make those other people dependent upon you. Try to help them so they can become independent. There's an old saying: it's better to teach a man to fish than to give a man a fish. Because if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. You teach a man to fish, he'll feed himself for the rest of his life. So that's what you need to try and do in your service to people. Okay, next one again. Do the true energetic selves exhibit human emotions? Do they interact with each other? What is the purpose other than to create aspects and record process their respective evolutions? They do have their own thing to do. To be honest, they have their own way of experiencing, learning, and evolving, and so they do communicate with each other. They don't have human emotions, except what they experience through their projections, i.e., the smaller aspects of sentience and energy that they project into various parts of the multiverse, which are us. So that's the way they experience human emotion, through us, really, but they don't experience it firsthand themselves. Okay, and they do communicate with each other all the time. Okay, we're in the human form to experience them and evolve. Evolve to what? Does evolution include create? Yes, it does. Absolutely, it involves creation. Are we limited by our sentience, percentage of sentience regarding our maximum possible evolution? That's a good question. It has an effect on the quality of evolution, I'm just being told. But we might incarnate one incarnation with an amount of sentience which is like a 2.5%. We might get 2.7% next time. We might get 3% next time. It depends upon how our true energetic self wants us to interact with the environment and affect it. How can the masters expect us to follow them when their sentience is higher than ours? What is their overarching goal, if there is one? Basically, the overarching goal is for us to evolve to the point, or work on ourselves to the point where we can experience our true nature. We can become self-aware and recognize who and what we are whilst we're in this embodied condition. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to experience every aspect of every universal environment in this particular multiverse to a point where we've mastered it. Then we can return to source. Then we can start a new evolutionary cycle when everybody else has done it, which is good. Okay, how are we able to process the slaughter? The appalling slaughter of 19 children and some of their teachers? If it's very easy to adopt a nihilistic point of view, what did they do and their families do to deserve this? This life is life meaningless? Well, basically, they have sacrificed themselves. And they came into the incarnation with this determination. of their incarnation in plan, to again create a condition where people are getting together and realizing that's harming ourselves in this very, very fortunate situation we find ourselves into, because being incarnated is an honor, absolute honor, and it's rare. There's queues of souls trying to incarnate. So we're trying to respect what we've got and how we can experience, learn, and evolve in the gross physical. So from that perspective, this is a group of souls working together to help make us think in the correct way, so that we don't abuse these vehicles, these bodies we've got that allow us to evolve. Because these are our evolutionary ticket, basically. And so, and to destroy them is wrong, in all sorts of ways of destroying them. But for us to, in effect, work together so we don't experience this, and that means dealing with people and working with people who have mental health issues, then we're starting to work in a more mature way. Well, last question. We've only got a few minutes left. Should we stop the use of fossil fuels? Is it good to stop the use of fossil fuels? It's good to stop the use of anything that is creating a condition where we are polluting our environment, where we're damaging our environment. And that could even include the human body in terms of what we eat and what we ingest. So we need to find a way to evolve beyond the need for the generation of energy in certain ways. And clearly fossil fuels, clearly nuclear ways are actually quite old. So we can start to use things like wind power, solar power, which are better, and other ways of using the universe to generate the powers we've got. And for us to understand that there are other energies out there, not just electricity, that can be used to power devices that we would be able to utilize to help us become more aware of our environment and the other entities that are in our environment that we currently aren't able to interact with. Okay, well, I think that's the end of the questions. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending today, and thank you, everybody, for one final question. How would the way of cooperation inside the EU be? Basically, everybody should be mature. In everybody who is on a committee that affects the lives of others in different countries should work in a mature way, where they have to think about how best to communicate, how best to work, how best to thrive in a way which is sustainable, physically and mentally, and environmentally and spiritually. That's the best way to work. Very simple words, but a lot of work behind it. So thanks again to everybody, and thank you for joining today. Namaste to you all. It's wonderful to be able to share some of this information, and some of it comes through as you ask the question, so it's not known by me. I'm just picking it up as we go through, so I'm very pleased, because a lot of this information is also new to me. Thank you, everybody, and namaste, and looking forward to seeing you all in July. So now we have the meditation associated with this World Satsanga, and today's meditation is all about connecting with your true energetic self, your higher self, your oversoul, or your Godhead. All these words mean exactly the same thing. It's that larger volume of sentience and energy, which is you in reality, not the small part, which is currently residing in this 10 layer or 10 frequencies associated with the vehicle that you think is your human body right now. Okay, so let's just settle down. So if you can sit in a straight backed chair, that's useful. If you can sit on the ground cross-legged, that's fine, or you can do half lotus or full lotus if you're flexible enough. If you're sitting in your straight back chair, sit with your back right in the corner of the chair, so your back is erect, your feet are flat on the ground. Okay. In all postures, make sure your hand is palm uppermost on the upper thighs, where the junction of the upper legs meets the lower body. Close your eyes, and your closed eye focused on the, or gently focused on the location of the origin of the spiritual or third eye, which is in the same area as the front spiritual or third eye chakra. They are not the same thing. They are not actually in the same place, but they do reside in the same place. Basically, they're separated by frequency. Okay. So gently focus on this point in between the two eyebrows and above the bridge of the nose. And just visualize or use your mentally spoken words to explain what the visualization might be. That you are connected to your true energetic self via this hypodermic needle-sized pan-frequential tube that still has the ability to connect you with your true energetic self, your higher self, your Godhead, or your Oversoul. But it is so small, it's hardly discernible. Nevertheless, though, it is there, and it does provide a connection still with your true energetic self. It allows the connection to be maintained irrespective of frequency. This horror line, small tube, spans the frequencies, connecting a small volume of sentience and energy that is your soul, your aspect, with the true energetic self, the larger aspect. If you wish, you can visualize that if it was a pipe with water in, it would take quite a long time to get the water out via this small hole in the tube. It's the same with communication. You could think about communicative bandwidth as being similar to the internal diameter of a tube that allows water to pass through it, or gas to pass through it. And the larger the diameter, the more water can pass through. Therefore, this example, the more communicative ability we have, the more data can pass through. So visualize this tube growing in internal, subsequently external diameter. So rather than being hypodermically small, now tube with the outside diameter is about the same diameter as the circumference of your head, your skull, just above the ears. See this tube growing. Ask it to grow. Visualize it to grow. Will it to grow in size. Its diameter increases. Then see the communication between you and your true energetic self, Godhead, Oversoul. Increasing Just like the volume of water passing through the tube would increase, so does the ability for you to communicate with that larger part of you also increases. See yourself stretching up inside this tube and connecting with a larger, significantly larger volume of sentience and energy. Visualize or use your mentally spoken word that you can see the energy, the data, the communication between you and your true energetic self moving up and down this horror line, the inside diameter of this horror line. The sparkles of white, silver, and gold flecks of energy moving in one direction, lowest frequencies to higher frequencies, passing on the data, the information, the experiences we've had in these low frequencies. And then similarly, you'll see energies or frequencies coming down the tube. Again, gold or silver or white flecks of energy transporting itself the opposite direction. If you wish, you can make it like a two-way road, where one set of traffic goes away from you, another set of traffic comes towards you. In reality, there's no such convention. The information just goes up and comes down. The information that's coming down is basically the desires of the true energetic self to experience more depth, maybe, with a certain experience. Or knowledge of a concurrence of an experience is what was supposed to be experienced. Or that experience was experienced previously by another aspect of our true energetic self. One of our soulmates, so to speak, or soul group, so to speak. All the souls or aspects that come from a single true energetic self are classified as being soulmates, and collectively it's a soul group. Just to give you the link between the descriptions that I use versus the old or more tried and tested descriptions. As you see the energy moving up this hypodermically small tube, the horror line, you feel your knowledge base increasing. Your ability to understand various concepts that may have been difficult are now becoming easy. Everything becomes clear. It's a little bit like waking up and suddenly having all the memories from a dream and all the memories from all dreams filling your mind. Like all the experiences you've had on this planet are suddenly yours to understand. To remember, to know that they are part of you. feel yourself expanding, being more than you are. You just squeezed yourself up this tube that you've made slightly larger. You're connecting with the rest of you. All the things you've forgotten about are now available to you, all concurrently. You can experience all experiences concurrently. You know all things concurrently. You are all things concurrently. It's a bit like having amnesia and suddenly knowing who you are. All you've got to do is meditate, visualize this tube, this Hara line, extend its internal diameter to that equaling the circumference of your skull. See yourself either moving into this tube or see the data moving up and down, the experiences, the knowledge, the understanding, the creativity, moving to and forth, up and down this tube to your true energetic self. And the feedback about what you think of as intuition about doing other things starts to come down. What's next? What do I need to experience next? How do I link previous experiences together to make it work? As you breathe out, you can experience, you feel like all the knowledge you've had goes up this tube to your true energetic self. As you breathe in, it feels like all the knowledge coming from that larger part of you in previous incarnations, previous experiences of other aspects of sentience and energy that are part of your true energetic self and therefore part of you, also coming down the tube. All of a sudden, you start to feel that you know everything. You've experienced everything, you've been everything, you've been everywhere. Whilst you're at your true energetic self, your Godhead, or your Oversoul, your higher self, visualize another wire, like a interface lead to your computer, for example. Take hold of it with your hands. Bring it back with you down this Hara line, this tube that allows the connection between you and your higher self. Godhead, Oversoul, true energetic self, to be maintained whilst you're incarnating these low frequencies. Bring this extra communication lead, this interface lead with you. Bring it down through the tube. So when you're back into your body and the tube shrinks, although this interface lead also shrinks, it's another link. Visualize your core star, not too far from your Tantien at the center of the body. Then visualize a connection that you can use and connect this other wire, this interface lead, to this connection to your soul, to your soul seat level. The juncture, or the junction where the sentience and the energy separate in order to animate the body, but nevertheless still stay co-joined via the soul seat, which is then co-joined to the true energetic self via the Tantian. You've just brought down with you another little aspect of communication that you can use. Something that's going to allow you to increase your communicative bandwidth with Source, other entities within the multiverse, or your true energetic self. But predominantly your true energetic self, because this is where the extra lead comes from, to allow you to gain more intuition, more clairsentience. More ability to know who, what you are, and detach from the immersion or the intensity of your incarnation, recognizing it's just that, a temporary condition that you're experiencing to experience, learn, and evolve in this low frequency environment and accelerate your evolutionary progression and, of course, the evolutionary progression of your true energetic self. You plug this lead into your core star. So now you've got increased bandwidth. So slowly come back into the room. Slowly open your eyes. Take a drink of water to help ground you. And let this settle down a bit for a day or two. And just see what comes to you in terms of intuition or sudden knowledge of subjects that you didn't previously have knowledge of before meditation. That's the end of this World Satsanga in June 22nd. Been a wonderful time experiencing your connectivity, of course, with event space being the dominant structure within structure within structure. There's no such thing as time. I can feel your presence now, even though from a linear perspective it's in the future. Looking forward to communicating with you all in July, and so therefore I'll say goodbye now and send you God's love and namaste to you all. And don't forget to look after yourselves and stay high frequency.